The third daughter left before noon. Her palanquin rolled slowly across the stone courtyard, velvet curtains drawn, her presence already fading before she had fully passed through the iron gates of Thornfield Castle. The sound of its wheels echoed softly against the ancient stone, a hollow rhythm that seemed to belong less to movement and more to memory, like something already becoming distant even as it happened. Servants lined the edges of the courtyard in practiced stillness, their heads bowed just enough to acknowledge the moment, but not enough to suggest feeling. Guards stood farther back, unmoving, their armor catching dull light beneath a pale sky that offered neither warmth nor judgment. It was a familiar sight. Too familiar. Another departure. Another union arranged. Another life redirected in the name of order. Prince Edmund stood watching. Still. Unmoved. High above the courtyard, from a stone balcony that had witnessed generations of similar moments, he observed it all without reaction. His hands rested lightly against the cold railing, not gripping, not tense, just present. The gates began to close. Slowly. Heavily. The sound of iron meeting iron rolled through the courtyard with a finality that should have marked something significant. An ending, a transition, a shift in the world he knew. But Edmund did not move. He did not speak. He did not feel it. And that was the problem. Because in a place where everything carried meaning, feeling nothing was not neutrality. It was absent. Inside the castle, the air was thick with expectation. It clung to the walls, settled into the floors, lingered in every corridor, every glance, every whisper that followed him. Duty lived here. It breathed here. I watched. His father's footsteps echoed long before he appeared, heavy with authority, measured with intention, each step announcing not just his presence but his control. The king did not enter rooms. He claimed them. Words were spoken. Firm. Unyielding. Precise. They were not suggestions. They were not conversations. They were declarations shaped by generations of belief, reinforced by years of unquestioned obedience. Edmund listened. He always listened. But this time, something was different. The words did not settle into him the way they once had. They did not anchor him. They did not shape him. They passed through him. Like wind through something hollow. He did not answer. Not because he could not. Because he would not. And in that silence, something shifted. Not loudly. Not visibly. But undeniably. His mother tried differently. Softer. Controlled. Precise. Where the king commanded, she reasoned. Where he imposed, she guided. Her voice carried a calm that had resolved countless tensions before, a quiet authority that did not need force to be effective. She stood beside him, not before him. Spoke to him, not at him. But even her calm could not reach him. Because this was not a matter of persuasion. It was something deeper. Something quieter. Something far more dangerous. Beyond them, the court watched. Nobles stood in quiet clusters, their conversations carefully muted, their expressions composed into something that resembled neutrality, but was not. They observed. They assessed. They judged. Not openly. They did not need to. Disappointment had a way of filling a room without sound. And in the center of it all, surrounded by expectation, watched from every angle, defined by every glance, Edmund stood alone. So that evening, he left. No escort. No announcement. No ceremony. Just silence. And the open road beyond the gates. The world outside Thornfield did not greet him. It did not acknowledge him. It simply existed. And for the first time, Edmund stepped into something that did not already know what he was meant to be. By dawn, the world had changed. Or perhaps he had. The river moved gently under pale light, its surface soft and untroubled, reflecting a sky that felt wider than anything he had ever known. There were no walls here. No expectations pressing in. No voices shaping what came next. It carried no weight of crowns or titles. And there, at its edge, she was. Rosalind. kneeling at the water, filling a pail with slow, practiced movements. Her hands moved with familiarity, with rhythm, with quiet certainty born not from instruction but from necessity. There was nothing remarkable in what she did. And yet, everything about her presence felt grounded, real, unconstructed. She noticed him, not with surprise, but with awareness. A subtle pause, a slight shift in her posture, the smallest acknowledgement that he existed without granting him importance. She told him to leave. Calmly, directly, without hesitation. He didn't. And so began a quiet resistance. Morning after morning, they returned to the same place. The river did not change. The light did not change. But something between them did. At first, there were only glances. Brief, measured, guarded, distance, carefully maintained. Silence sharpened by distrust. She ignored him. He stayed anyway. Days passed. Then more. The silence between them softened. Not broken, but reshaped. It lost its edge. Lost its resistance. Became something else. Something shared. Until one morning. It no longer felt like distance. It felt like understanding. But the world beyond the river had begun to shift. In the market, whispers followed Rosalind like shadows. Subtle at first. Then more deliberate. Eyes lingered too long. Conversations stopped when she passed. Not out of respect. But be careful. Suspicion. Something unseen had begun to move through the town, quiet and persistent, touching everything without revealing itself. At home, silence carried a different weight. Her stepmother watched her. Not with warmth. Not with care. But with calculation. Every movement is observed. Every choice is measured. Nothing escaped her notice. And then, the Queen came. Not as royalty, but as a presence. She entered the small cottage like something that did not belong, her composure untouched by the modest space around her. The room itself seemed to shrink around her, as though recognizing a power it could not contain. Her words were calm, deliberate, unmistakable. A warning. A line drawn without being seen. Rosalind listened. She did not interrupt. She did not react. And when the Queen left, she burned the letter that followed. I watched it curl, blacken, disappear, as though whatever it carried had no place in her world. Still, she returned to the river. And Edmund was always there. Until one day, silence was no longer enough. The great hall filled with expectation once more. But this time, it felt different. Heavier. Sharper. As though something long held in place had begun to loosen. And this time, it was Edmund who stepped forward. He did not hesitate. He did not falter. And when he spoke, the words did not echo. They shattered. He would marry her. The room erupted. Shock. Outrage. Disbelief. Voices collided, rising over one another in a storm of resistance and fear. The king rose in fury, his authority cracking under the weight of something he could not immediately control. Lords argued. Power strained against itself. But far from the chaos, Rosalind sat alone, reading, understanding, accepting. And as night fell, something deeper began to break. The land turned. Fields darkened as though life itself had withdrawn. The river shrank unnaturally. Livestock collapsed without warning. The air itself felt wrong. Heavy. Unstable. Fear spreads faster than reason. The kingdom was unraveling. And in the great hall, a single word emerged. Sacrifice. It came quietly, but it carried the weight of everything. And when the moment came to choose, it was not fate that spoke. It was betrayal. Her stepmother's voice was calm, certain, final. Rosalind did not cry. She did not argue. She simply turned and accepted what had already been decided. Edmund's rage shook stone from the walls. But even anger could not undo what had begun. So, Rosalind prepared. Carefully, deliberately. She folded her apron, placed it where it belonged. She put on white. Simple. Unadorned. Final. She left her shoes behind. And then, she walked. Through the silent market. Past the watching eyes. Through the weight of a world that had already decided her fate. Toward the forest. Darkwood. It stood waiting. Not like a place, but like a question. And at its edge, she did not hesitate. She stepped forward. And disappeared. Time slowed. The kingdom held its breath. Wind moved faintly through the trees. Rain began as a whisper against the earth. Soft. Steady. Uncertain. And then, she returned. Changed. Not broken. But marked. Something ancient had touched her. Something undeniable had reshaped her. And the world knew it. The truth followed quickly. Secrets do not stay buried when power begins to shift. A confession unraveled everything. Betrayal exposed. Lies stripped bare. Cordelia fell. Not with violence, but with silence. The king turned away. And just like that, her power was gone. But Rosalind's had only begun. She stood once more in the great hall, not as sacrifice, but as a judge. Voices challenged her, tested her, measured her worth against tradition, against expectation, against fear. She did not raise her voice. She did not falter. She listened, truly listened. And when she spoke, the room changed. Because truth, when spoken without fear, carries a different kind of authority, one that cannot be given, only earned. Even the king saw it. Even Edmund felt it. And for the first time, the crown no longer looked like power. It looked like responsibility. The past came quietly after that. Her stepmother approached, not as a figure of control, but as someone who had already lost. There were no excuses, no defenses, only regret. Rosalind listened, and then, with measured grace, she let it go. Not for the past, but for the future. The night of coronation arrived without spectacle, but with weight. Candles filled the great hall with soft, unwavering light. Every figure present understood what this moment meant. Not tradition. Transformation. Edmund stepped forward, the crown in his hands, not as a prince claiming power, but as a man recognizing it. He placed it gently upon her head, and for a moment, the world stood still. Then Rosalind lifted her gaze, and the kingdom bowed, not out of obligation, but out of truth, because power had not been taken. It had not been given. It had been proven. And in that moment, the crown did not define her. She defined the crown.